السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. First of all, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his countless blessings and bounties, and we ask him to continue blessing us until we meet with him inshallah. Secondly, as they say, everything that has a beginning has an end. We come to an end tonight of the Clear Your Doubts course about Islam. And I hope those who have been attending will have benefited a lot and will be in position to benefit others as well. The best way to learn is to teach. So whatever you've benefited, I suggest that you go and benefit others. Third, our topic tonight is the wisdom behind divorce and its ruling in Islam. And in order to discuss this topic objectively, we will answer the following questions and many more. So among the questions that we'll answer during the presentation is this: what are the types of divorce in Islam? 2, why is a waiting period legislated after every divorce? So after every divorce, there is a period of 3 months. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislate this period of waiting for 3 months in order to go to another step? And another question is, when can a wife initiate divorce, and what lessons do we learn from that? So the critics of Islam do not know that there is a time when a woman or a wife can initiate divorce. They always think that the divorce is in the hands of the man only. There are some situations whereby the woman can initiate divorce, and the judge or any person in leadership will force the man to divorce her. Another question is, who is favored more by the Islamic law of divorce? Is it men or women? So the Islamic law of divorce, whom does it favor more? Does it favor women or men? We will see. And another question is, what are the risks of forcing couples to stay in wedlock when all avenues of reconciliation have failed? So husband and wife have misunderstandings, they reach a point whereby they dislike one another, and either their parents or the authorities force them to continue living with one another despite their differences. So what are the risks of forcing people to stay together when they no longer like each other, they no longer have feelings for one another? So we'll be discussing this point as well. So let's begin. I will begin with this. Actually, it's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some scholars say it's weak, others say it's authentic. Al-Albani, who is a celebrated scholar, who is very well versed in prophetic narrations, at the beginning he rated it as weak, as da'if. But later on, after extensive research, he said it is authentic. So some scholars are there who say it's not authentic. Some of them say it is authentic. Some of them say the meaning is correct, but the wording isn't authentic. So all in all, the meaning is correct. And Al-Albani eventually said the hadith is authentic. So in this hadith, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says the most hated of permissible things to Allah is divorce. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has permitted us to do some things, has permitted us to eat some types of foods. So among the most hated thing which Allah has permitted is divorce. But again, divorce doesn't have only one ruling. So in this case, before reaching the point of divorcing one another, couples have to try all avenues of reconciliation. So divorce should not be the first option, it should be the last option. Yeah, actually, it should be the last resort after all avenues of reconciliation have failed. So it should be the last thing that couple should think of. So it shouldn't be the first option. Many people rush to divorce, yet after some time, they will regret when it's too late. So according to scholars of Islamic jurisprudence, divorce does not have one ruling. Sometimes it's compulsory. Sometimes a man is forced to divorce his wife. A woman is forced to seek divorce from her husband, especially if, according to some scholars, if a husband wants to satisfy his carnal desires through through avenues through channels that are not allowed in Islam. And sometimes it's compulsory, divorce is compulsory. Sometimes it is haram, it's forbidden, haram to divorce. And sometimes it's makruh, frowned upon or denounced. And sometimes it's recommended, and sometimes it's halal, it's mubah, it's allowed, it's permissible. So you see, it depends on the situation, it depends on the reasons for divorce. So sometimes it could be haram, sometimes it could be compulsory, sometimes it could be makruh, frowned upon, something denounced, disliked. Sometimes it could be recommended, and sometimes it could be permissible. So it depends on the reasons for divorce, and it depends on circumstances and situations. And this is why we say it shouldn't be the first option, it should be the last resort, because as you said before, marriage is the most sacrosanct institution in Islam. So when you are happily married, you are worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by staying in marriage. Whatever couples do to one another, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards them. In other words, by staying married, you are worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you are rewarded for that. Even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, when you satisfy your carnal desires, husband and wife, legally, from within the parameters of the teachings of Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards you. And the companions were surprised. They said, "O Messenger of Allah, how can someone satisfy his desires and get rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?" The Prophet ﷺ asked them, "What if he did it illicitly? Would it be a sin?" They said, "Yes." He said, "Inasmuch as it is a sin to satisfy your carnal desires illicitly, you get rewarded if you do that illicitly." So the only way to do that is to marry. So when you say whatever you do to your wife, whatever you do to your husband, you help them, you make them happy, you are worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you are happily married here on earth, you will also be husband and wife in paradise. So I go to this quote here, which says, "Being divorced does not divorce you from the mercy and love of He who created you." So if someone is divorced by the husband, a woman divorces a husband divorces his wife, this does not mean that this person is divorced by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will still be loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will still be under the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And actually, in some cultures, when a woman is divorced, it's a stigma, and this shouldn't be. And unfortunately, some of these cultures are cultures within Muslim communities. So once someone is divorced, so they start pointing at her, calling her names, saying a lot of things, insulting her. So this shouldn't be the case. You know, divorce is halal, and there are reasons for everything. And actually, you cannot force yourself into marriage, which will be prison for you. Where the purpose of marriage is love, protection, intimacy. So when there is no love, there is no intimacy. So what's the point of staying in such a marriage, which will be punishment for you on earth, and which will be a temptation for someone to seek for love in other ways? So critics of Islam do say, who haven't actually studied the issue of divorce, they say, you differentiate between men and women in the right to divorce, in that you've given men the upper hand in divorce because of your lack of confidence and trust in women's abilities and efficiency. You also want to make a woman dependent on her husband for the stability of her home and her happiness. Either way, she is threatened, whether he keeps her or divorces her. So the critics of Islam say that because Islam gives the man the upper hand to divorce his wife, and the woman doesn't have any right whatsoever to do the same. So whether the marriage works or it doesn't work, she is threatened, because she knows anytime when the man is angry, when the man is not satisfied with her, anytime he can divorce her. So she will be at the mercy of her husband's feelings. And the problem is, they are quick to criticize Islam without studying extensively the issue of divorce as well as others. So point number one, there are two types of divorce. And actually, when you talk about types of divorce, it depends on the circumstances, it depends on the situation, it depends on the legal perspective of it, because divorce could be divided into different categories, different types, depending on what you want to talk about. So regarding this issue, the issue of critics of Islam criticizing Muslims that The woman doesn't have the right to divorce her husband. She is forced to stay in marriage despite her ill feelings towards the husband, which is not correct. So they accuse Muslims. So there are two types of divorce regarding this issue. The first is by the will of both parties, which is called a common will or a shared will. So you reach a point, husband and wife, where both of you are no longer compatible with one another. All the avenues of reconciliation have failed. So both of you agree unanimously that we should divorce. So this is a common will. Now, the critics of Islam do not have problems with this, where both husband and wife reach a point where they say it's better for us to divorce. Critics of Islam don't have a problem with this. They only have a problem when divorce is initiated by the man. Even they don't have a problem when divorce is initiated by the woman. In some situations, divorce could be initiated by the woman, and we will see why can this happen. So the second one, the second type of divorce regarding this issue is by an individual will. So it is either initiated by the husband while the wife is unwilling, or initiated by the wife while the husband is unwilling. Both types exist in Islam. So both can agree together, man and woman, to divorce. Divorce could be initiated by the man, and it could be initiated by the woman. So sometimes the woman is willing to stay in marriage, and the man, for one reason or the other, he's unwilling. And sometimes the man is willing, and the woman, for one reason or the other, isn't willing to stay in marriage. So both situations exist. So regarding divorce, the Islamic law took all cases and circumstances into consideration. So the Islamic law looks into different angles about this issue. So it does not quickly issue one type of ruling. There are a lot of consideration before the issue of divorce can be reached. So point number two, we must first differentiate between the beauty and fairness of the system and its misuse and abuse by some people. If men or women misuse this right, it doesn't mean that it's bad or unfair. So in other words, the system is there. We have to learn it, we have to understand it, and we have to use it properly, and we have to be sincere when we resort to this system. So when we abuse it, it's our problem. It's not the problem isn't with the system. So those critics of Islam, they look at the situation of the Muslims, how they handle this issue. So they criticize Islam because of the behavior of some irresponsible Muslims who are quick to jump to conclusions without trying other avenues of reconciliation. So instead, it means that irresponsible, selfish humans are the ones who abuse it. So if there is any problem, it's a problem with human beings, not with the system. It is common in all religions to find some adherents who do not follow the teachings verbatim. So anyone, whether he's a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or whatever religion he's affiliated to, not all people who claim to follow their religion, they follow its teachings verbatim. So if there is any person who abuses the rules of divorce in Islam, so we can't generalize that all Muslims are like that, or we can't find fault with the system itself. So the system is perfect. We have to learn how to use it, and we have to make sure when we use it, we are sincere. We shouldn't fall prey to our whims and desires, and then we accuse the system that it's not working, yet we are not honest inside of our hearts. Like I said before, in the past, when women were not allowed to inherit, someone would claim he loves someone, he wants to marry her, not because of her, because of her father's wealth. So such kind of a person, if there is a slight mistake, he would jump to the conclusion of divorce. So this person had ulterior motives. The problem isn't with divorce. The problem is with the purpose of this person to marry that woman. He wasn't sincere from the beginning. So if someone isn't sincere from the beginning, the marriage will not work. And this is why I always advise people who take marriage courses before they marry, that if you want your marriage to be successful, be sincere. Do not have ulterior motives. Don't marry someone because of their wealth. Don't marry someone because you expect something from them. Marry them because you like them. Marry them because you feel you can continue with them despite all odds. But if you have ulterior motives, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot help you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what we harbor in our hearts and minds. So we can't lie to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help you, yet you have ulterior motives? You aren't sincere. If you are sincere, then you will follow the teachings verbatim, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you. So those who advocate for equality between men and women do not have reservations about the common will divorce, but rather on the divorce that is initiated by the husband. So as I said before, divorce could be initiated by both husband and wife. Both of them agree this is a common will, or it could be initiated by the man or the woman. Now, the critics of Islam don't have problems with divorce when it is agreed upon by both husband and wife. They don't have an issue when the divorce is initiated by the woman. They only have an issue when it's initiated by the man. And actually, the man here is miskin. So everything initiated by the man, according to the critics of Islam, is bad. When a woman does it, it's like when you talk about domestic violence. Some men are facing some types of domestic violence by their wives, but people don't talk about that. So if divorce is initiated by the man, the Islamic law grants the wife psychological and financial compensation, waiting period expenses, and full dowry, except in the case of the wife's blatant misconduct. So if the man initiated the divorce, he divorced her, he has his own reasons, so there will be psychological and financial compensation that he will have to pay to the wife. And during the waiting period, as we said, there are three levels. There is first divorce, the second, and the third. So before you move to the second divorce, there is a period of three intervals of cleanliness from menstruation. So, and we could say 3 months. So you have to wait. And the reason behind this is maybe during this time of 3 months, you can come back to your senses, you can reconcile with one another, you can correct your mistakes, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bless you, you stay together. So if it doesn't work, you decide to divorce her the second time, again, you will have to wait 3 months. And the third time, this is the final one. So all this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give us the chance to reconcile with one another, to make amends, so that we stay married happily. And if we die while still happily married, we will be husband and wife in paradise. Conversely, if the divorce is initiated by the wife, then the judge will force the man to divorce her. So if the wife initiated the divorce, and we will see some situations whereby a wife could initiate the divorce, then the judge will force them to separate. And there is a situation that happened during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, where a wife complained about her husband to the Prophet ﷺ, and he had to force the husband to divorce her. And if her husband, a woman's husband, was abusive and negligent, the divorced woman receives financial compensation. So if, for example, the husband was abusive, was negligent of his duties, the wife reached a conclusion of seeking divorce, then he will give her financial compensation. If her divorce request is not due to her husband's misconduct or negligence, but rather stems from personal dissatisfaction, then she returns the dowry he had paid when marrying her. So when a woman reaches a point whereby she's no longer satisfied by the man, she no longer likes the man, and the only thing she wants is divorce, then she has to return the dowry that he had given her at marriage. And actually, this brings us to a question: when can a woman seek divorce? There are many situations, but I will go through a few of them. In principle, a woman is not allowed to seek divorce. Originally, or in principle, a woman should not seek divorce from her husband. But if pushed to the corner, she's then allowed. If there is no any reason, there is no any credible reason for a woman to seek divorce, she isn't allowed to do that in Islam. And actually, there is a hadith, an authentic hadith by the Prophet ﷺ about this issue. عن ثوبان مولى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: أيما امرأة سألت زوجها طلاقا في غير ما بأس فحرام عليها رائحة الجنة. صححه الألباني في صحيح أبي داود. So the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith that was narrated by Thawban. Thawban was a protected ally of the Prophet ﷺ. He said that the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, said, any woman who seeks divorce from her husband without any harm inflicted on her, in other words, she doesn't have any reason to seek divorce. Her husband is treating her well, he didn't do any harm to her, he didn't injure her, he didn't do anything wrong. So despite all this, if any woman goes ahead to seek divorce without any harm inflicted on her, then the fragrance of paradise will be unlawful for her. In other words, she won't be among the first people to enter paradise. All of us believers, we believe, Muslims, that all of us will eventually go to paradise. But at first, those people who had died without repentance, they will be punished for their sins, and eventually they will go to paradise. So according to this hadith, if any woman seeks divorce from her husband without any justification, without any reason, she will not be among the first people who will enter paradise. But there are some situations whereby she is allowed to seek divorce and no one blames her. For example, if her husband fails to provide her with food and shelter, so she married someone, he can't provide her with food, and among the responsibilities of a man is to protect his wife from fear and hunger. To protect his wife from fear and hunger. This is just this is a brief, a concise statement of the responsibilities of a man to protect his wife from fear and hunger. So if he fails to provide for his wife, to provide her with food and shelter, she is free to seek divorce. Or if he can't fulfill his marital duties, so if he reaches a point whereby he becomes impotent, so she has the right to seek divorce, because this is very important in Islam. Number two, if the man continuously insults her, he doesn't value her, he belittles her, he yells at her, he's not intimate whatsoever with her, and if worse becomes worse, that he reaches a point of attacking her physically, assaulting her, then in such a situation, she has the right to seek divorce. As we said before, the man does not have any right whatsoever to physically assault his wife. So if he continuously does this, despite warnings, despite advice, then according to Islam, the woman has the right to ask divorce, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We've honored the children of Adam. So the man doesn't have any right whatsoever to abuse his wife, to physically assault his wife. So he has to deal with her with respect. Cursing or abusing her religion. So for example, he's not religiously committed, he's a Muslim, but he doesn't pray, he doesn't fast. So when she prays, when she fasts, if he continuously finds fault with her because she's practicing religion, then in such a situation, she can petition for divorce. Or if, according to some scholars, if he stays away from her for 6 months, if he travels, for example, and he stays 6 months without appearing, and she can no longer bear being away from him, so she has the right to seek divorce. Or if he commits major sins like if he drinks alcohol continuously, he doesn't pray, he commits fornication, and he has extramarital affairs. So in such a situation, the woman has the right to seek divorce. And this is what they call khulu, to disassociate herself from the man. So in both divorce and khulu, a woman must observe the iddah, which is a waiting period that lasts for 3 menstrual periods, or 3 intervals of cleanness between menstruations. So if in case any divorce happens, or any khulu, which is the woman disassociating herself from the man, then before she remarries anyone else, or before she goes back to her husband, if it's the first or second divorce, she has to wait for 3 menstrual periods, or 3 intervals of cleanness between menstruation. The husband may reinstate the marriage during iddah if he so wills, but this applies only to a revocable divorce that he initiated. If it is khulu, he cannot reinstate the marriage. When the iddah ends, the process is complete. In other words, if it's the first divorce, during this waiting period, he can easily go back to her. But if it is the second divorce, and after her waiting period, and he wishes to go back to her, then he has to remarry her afresh, bring new dowry, marry her the way he did at the beginning, and at this point she has the right to stipulate premarital conditions that he has to fulfill. So Imam Ibn Qudama, who is among the famous jurists in Islam, said, if a wife dislikes her husband's behavior, religious commitment, so his behavior, the husband's behavior isn't good, he's not strongly committed to his religion, he doesn't pray, he doesn't fast, and the woman doesn't like it, and if he's an old man, he's weak among others, and she is afraid that if she continues to stay with him, she might disobey Allah, then in this situation, she has the right to detach herself from the man, to disassociate herself from the husband. For example, during the time of the Prophet, Ibn Abbas said that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, ordered the wife of Thabit ibn Qais to return the garden he had given her as dowry. Actually, the story is, the wife of Thabit ibn Qais said to the Prophet ﷺ, O Messenger of Allah, I don't complain about his behavior. He's a well-behaved man. He's religiously committed. He's a good man. He prays, he fasts. But I dislike to be ungrateful and to misbehave if I remain with him. So according to scholars, Thabit ibn Qais was among the bona fide companions of the Prophet ﷺ. He was a man of good character, good behavior. He was religiously committed, praying, fasting, doing all other duties. But the problem was he was unkempt and shabby. He didn't take care of his hygiene. So the woman reached a conclusion that she no longer had feelings for him. So she went to the Prophet ﷺ. She didn't give him the whole story, but the Prophet, because it's, again, according to Islam, even if there is a misunderstanding between husband and wife, we are not allowed to disclose matrimonial secrets. These secrets remain sacrosanct, and anyone who reveals any matrimonial secret, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be angry with him or her. So even if it's a big problem, just we have to speak in riddles, to say something that will allude to the problem, but we don't graphically describe the problem, how it happened. So the woman was general. She said, Thabit ibn Qais is a good man, he prays, he's a man of character, but I am afraid if I continue living with him, I will disobey him and I will disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet ﷺ understood that there was a problem. So the Prophet summoned Thabit ibn Qais. He asked him, if she returns to you the garden that you had given her as dowry at marriage, will you divorce her? He said, yes. So the Prophet commanded Thabit ibn Qais to divorce her. And as such, the woman disassociated herself from the man. He was a good man, praying, but the problem was he didn't take care of himself. He was not clean, he was not smart, he was not tidy. So this was one of the reasons why she initiated the divorce. And actually, cleanliness is very important between couples. Taking care of hygiene is very important. So we have to put all this into perspective. So point number 4, after studying carefully the marriage laws, I found that all of them except one protect the woman's interests. So if you read extensively the marriage laws in Islam, almost all of them favor women except one, which is khulu. When a woman, when she decides by herself to detach herself from her husband, then she has to pay back the dowry that he had given her. So this is the only one that favors men, but all others favor women. The one that protects men is the ruling in the case of khulu, that she should return the dowry. And the reason behind this, in as much as we have materialistic women, materialistic men, we also have materialistic women. Maybe primarily this woman married the man because of his fortune. So after marrying him, now she knows she has the chance to get it. She divorces him and she expects to get part of it so that she could marry a man of her choice. So Islam says no. If you initiated the divorce, the man isn't wrong, he isn't abusive, he didn't insult you, he didn't assault you, you decided because you no longer have feelings for him, then you have to return the dowry. And this is fair, and this protects the man in different ways. Otherwise, it would be very easy to take advantage of his wealth. I believe that every other marriage regulation is in the best interest of women. So the critics of Islam who claim that we deny women their rights, they cannot initiate divorce, they are ignorant of the laws of divorce in Islam. Point number 5, anyone researching the subject of divorce in various religions and cultures will conclude that some of them prohibit divorce and separation between spouses. Some don't see any value in divorce. So some cultures, some other religions, it's haram for someone to divorce his wife. Even if you don't like her, even if you no longer have feelings for one another, you still keep her. As such, there are a lot of crimes against spouses, against women, against men, and we hear a lot about this. So why do you force someone to continue living with someone under the same roof when they no longer like one another, when they are no longer compatible with one another? Like one man told me that he was in prison for 20 years when he was forced by his authorities to stay with his wife who was abusive. So finally, when he got the chance to divorce, he was relieved. And actually, he celebrated the divorce because according to him, he was in prison. So to them, to some religions, the door is always open. Either you marry or maintain celibacy, or you marry and divorce. They do not care about any of these scenarios. So we see a lot of cultures apart from Islam, even they don't have a proper system of divorce, how to address the issue of divorce, or how divorce happens, what happens when a person wants to remarry his wife. They don't have all those details, and the details are at the mercy of the interpretation of some people according to their whims and desires. But in Islam, we have details. So Islam, on the other hand, is a moderate and straightforward religion in all aspects of life, and especially with regard to divorce. It legislated divorce, albeit with rules and regulations to put a check on the spouse's whims and desires and emotions. And this is why I said at the beginning, there is no one ruling about divorce in Islam. Sometimes it's haram, sometimes it's compulsory, sometimes it's recommended, sometimes it's legal. So it depends on the situation, it depends on the circumstances, and it depends on the reasons for divorce. So sometimes it could be haram to divorce someone. If there were no strings attached to divorce, divorce would turn into a destructive tool to the most important institution in Islam, which is marriage. According to Islam, the most important institution is marriage or family. So if there were no strings attached to divorce, if it was left to the mercy of a husband or wife, it would be chaotic. And one of the reasons why we are here on earth is to procreate, and procreation happens through marriage. And this is why marriage is valued in Islam, and actually it's an act of worship, because through it we fulfill one of the reasons why we are here on earth. So I have this quote here: divorce isn't such a tragedy. A tragedy is staying in an unhappy marriage. So divorce isn't a tragedy. You can divorce and remarry. But the problem is to be forced to stay with someone with whom you are not compatible, who doesn't like you, whom you don't like. So this is a big, big problem. It will create some psychological problems, physical problems, and it will be detrimental to one's health and wellness. So as such, Islam allows divorce, although it is the most hated permissible thing. But when there are credible reasons for it, so it's recommended. So we come to this point whereby legal experts regard it a big mistake to judge a clause or a text without looking at the context of the whole constitution or document in order to understand how the clauses and texts are connected to each other. So those people who criticize Islam, that it denies women the right to divorce their husbands, they didn't dig deep into the rules of divorce in Islam. So they just read one aspect of it and they capitalize on it to discredit Islam. So they have to go deep and see what are the reasons, what is the rationale of every aspect of the law of divorce in Islam. So Islam deals with divorce from two angles, as a jeweler uses both sides of a scale. So someone selling, for example, gold, he has a scale, it has two pans. So he would place a chain, for example, on one scale and a stone on one, to see how to measure the weight of the jewelry. So the same thing in Islam. Islam puts one part of the scale in man's hand and the other in the woman's hand. So the man can initiate the divorce, the woman can do, and both of them can initiate it. So there is no injustice done to women. They have also the right to divorce when time is due for that. So in some cases, man is allowed to divorce his wife, and in such a situation, his wife is given her complete dowry and alimony. So when the man initiates the divorce, and if he had married her and didn't complete paying the dowry, so he has to pay the dowry he has to complete the dowry and then pay her the alimony. because sometimes it could be maybe because of financial reasons. He owes her a lot of money in dowry, so he sees someone else, he wants to marry her, and he doesn't have the money to pay, so he divorces her without any reason, or in order to pay the dowry to another woman. That isn't allowed in Islam. So if he decides to divorce her, he has to pay full dowry to her, and he has to pay alimony. So those rights may sometimes be regarded as loss or benefit depending on the situation and the party concerned. So the rights of divorce given to men or to women, some people may look at them as benefits, and some people may look at them as loss. But all in all, if you are sincere, if you follow the teachings verbatim, you have all to benefit. There is nothing to lose. You only lose when you are not sincere. So when you resort to the rules of divorce and you take them as scapegoat for you to divorce your wife, where you have other ulterior motives, this is where the problem lies. So point number 7, among the ironies as stated by Imam Al-Ghazali is, at the time when an Egyptian woman protests against divorce, an English woman protests against the perpetuity of marriage. Al-Imam Al-Ghazali was from Persia. He traveled a lot and he saw a lot, especially in the West. So he says one of the ironies whereby in countries where they criticize Muslims for allowing women to divorce their husbands or husbands to divorce their wives, he said, at the time when in some Muslim countries women are protesting against divorce, they don't like it. Some Western countries where in many places divorce is prohibited, women are protesting against the perpetuity of marriage, especially if it is an abusive marriage. So someone told me that Mr. White, who was a member of the House of Commons in England, presented a motion asking for divorce to be legislated and implemented if a man was separated from his wife for more than 7 years. So this member of House of Commons in the UK tabled a motion saying that if a man is separated from his wife for 7 years, he has to be forced to divorce her. And actually in Islam, it's 6 months. If a man stays away from his wife for 6 months and she can no longer bear staying away from him, she has the right to seek divorce. And the judge can force him to divorce her in absentia, or the judge can divorce her on his behalf. For example, divorce is not acceptable if the husband is angry or under duress, or when his wife is in her menstrual period. So, you know, there are strings attached to it. So when under the fit of anger, divorce isn't counted, because, you know, under the fit of anger, you can divorce her without being rational, without any justification, only to regret when you come back to your senses. So according to Islam, someone cannot divorce his wife when he's angry or when he's forced by someone to divorce her. Maybe someone has an eye on her and he was angry why this man marries her. So at gunpoint, he forces you to divorce and you utter a word of divorce because you're threatened. So this isn't counted in Islam. Or when she's in her menstrual period, divorce isn't allowed. You can only divorce her in some situations, including when she isn't in her menstrual period. Moreover, there is always room for reconciliation, which explains why divorce should be done in 3 phases, leaving a reasonable gap between them. And these 3 phases take 3 months, after which divorce is granted. And actually, scholars and experts, they say if divorce happens, for example, if it's the first divorce and the woman and husband are still together in the same house, if it's the first divorce, then if the mistake was initiated by the woman, then she has to adorn herself, make herself attractive to the man, do everything she could to bring him back. So Islam is giving people chances to reconcile with one another, something that you cannot find in any other religion. So the first intention to divorce is regarded as a gauge or test, the first divorce, whereas the second one represents the last attempt and the test of the relationship between the spouses. The third one, the third divorce, represents an indication that the relationship is at deadlock, and as such, differences are irreconcilable. So you have first divorce, 3 months, second divorce, 3 months. So you have a long period of time in which you can reconcile with one another, you can do whatever you could to attract one another, you can bring in people to bring you together. So if despite all this it fails, this means the marriage is doomed. So you go for the third divorce, whereby after you divorce your wife the third time, you can't come back to her until she marries someone and that person willingly divorces her. This is when you can remarry her. So considering all this, couples have to always make amends before they think even of divorce. So the issue of divorce is therefore not a frivolous play that people would mess around with. You can't mess around with, because when there are strings attached to it. When you're angry, you can't divorce her. When she's pregnant, you can't divorce her. When she's in her menses, you can't divorce her. When someone forces you to divorce her, it's not counted. So there are strings attached to it. Point number 9, the Islamic law has brought to perfection and treated seriously the issue of reunion of couples, especially after the second divorce. Reunion of spouses after the first and second divorce is treated with much regard and consideration in Islam, because humans are prone to making mistakes as well as being overpowered by some weaknesses. So sometimes we are overpowered by emotions and weaknesses. So if these weaknesses drive us into divorce, then we still have the chance. If it is the first divorce, you still have 3 months to reconcile with one another. If it's the second, you still have the chance. But when the third one is issued, then there is no chance. And there is no man is perfect. No woman is perfect. Not all of us will have weaknesses. So we have to deal with one another as human beings, and we have to be sincere in dealing with one another. So the wife's rights, freedom, and dignity can be safeguarded if she's given the chance to remarry her husband, especially after the second divorce. However, that remarriage can only take effect after a waiting period of 3 months. So if, for example, the man divorced his wife the second time, she has to wait for 3 months, or for 3 intervals of cleanliness from menstrual period, and then he can remarry her. So after completing the waiting period, which is iddah of 3 months, the husband cannot whatsoever reunite with his wife until he pays another dowry and concludes a new marital contract. So again, these rules make men think. So before you divorce your wife the second time, especially if it's done because under the fit of anger, or you were unhappy with some aspects of her behavior, you think about remarrying her, because you'll have to pay the same dowry you paid at the beginning. Then you have to conclude a new contract. And in such a situation, the wife has the right to stipulate prenuptial conditions that she deems conducive to safeguard her rights. So if you go for the second, after the second divorce, the man wants to bring back his wife. Now at this point, because she already knows him, she's been with him for a long time, she has the chance and the right to stipulate some prenuptial conditions. If you want to remarry me, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And she has to sign against this contract in front of the judge. So this will protect the woman, and it will protect her personality and reputation. So this is again an avenue for reconciliation and an avenue to amend what went wrong, and to prove that we are all human beings who have mistakes. So to avoid such mistakes, we have to put in place some rules and regulations that we have to follow, so that our marriage stays safe. So point number 10, according to psychology, to most men, the left side of the brain, which is normally responsible for practicability, realism, reasonability, and rationality, dominates the right side to many men. On the other hand, to most women, the right side of the brain, which is strongly responsible for intuition, creativity, and emotionality, dominates the left side. So men are practical, they are reasonable. Women are people of intuition, but sometimes, depending on their physiological changes, they become more emotional than rational. And as we said before, this is not a weakness. They are created they were created as such because they're going to be mothers, and mothers need tender feelings. So they are perfect the way they are. And when we deal with them, we have to put into consideration that there are physiological changes that take place in women which do not take place in men. So you can't expect women to behave all the time like men behave, women to react to different situations the same way the men react. This can't happen. Psychology agrees to, psychology confirms this, and even some narrations of the Prophet, peace be upon him, confirm this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put into consideration the individual differences between men and women in legalizing divorce, albeit primarily in man's hand. However, a woman is also given her rights through channels that are compatible with her emotional nature. So the woman also has the right to initiate the divorce. The man also has the right, and both of them have the right to agree on it. Point number 11, and actually this is interesting. At the beginning, when I heard this, I thought maybe it wasn't true, but I asked experts from this country and they confirmed it. So according to this research, it so happened in Tunisia that women were granted the divorce right the same way men avail of it. Surprisingly, it was noticed afterwards that divorce rates quadrupled in that country in that year to alarming proportions. Due to that, legal authorities swiftly reversed their changes that they did to the divorce law. So in other words, in that country, there was a time when women were given the same rights to divorce the husband the way a husband is given the rights to divorce his wife. But during that year, 1 year, divorce rates went high. They reached alarming proportions until the authorities were forced to reverse their decision. So it then surfaced that most women had divorced their husbands due to emotional reaction. After cooling down, the women regretted later when it was too late. You know, as we said, for example, there's what psychologists call premenstrual syndrome. So before a woman's menses, she's more emotional than rational, easily irritated when she's pregnant. So in such a situation, the husband makes a mistake. So because there are a lot of physiological changes taking place affecting her brain, she will be quick to issue the divorce, and after which she will regret. And how many times, for example, we hear of pregnant women assaulting their husbands, killing their husbands. So she's carrying a husband's child, killing him, and when giving birth, she regrets, I wish my husband was here to see his child, when it's too late. So point number 12, in some states of America, when a man divorces his wife, she becomes entitled to a half of his wealth. In so doing, injustice is done to both parties. The woman accumulates wealth that she didn't work for and adds it to her own properties undeservedly. This is unfair to her and to her ex-husband. And actually, as we said, not only men are materialistic, some women are materialistic, maybe. Some women are also materialistic. So maybe the woman initially, she married someone not because of love, not because because of intimacy. Maybe she was targeting his wealth. And after marrying him, she creates a situation whereby he is forced to divorce her and she takes half of his wealth. And actually, if we were in a classroom, if it wasn't an online class, I would have loved to ask women, because here it says a woman taking half wealth of her husband during divorce in some countries is injustice to her and to her husband. So I would like to know, how is it injustice for a woman who is married to a man and during divorce she takes half of his wealth? How is it injustice to her when she's taking half of the wealth? So regarding the man, the wealth that he toiled to amass for so long is taken from him unfairly. So an Islamic lawyer and jurist informed me of a man who owned real estate, bonds, and shares in millions. Before divorcing his wife, he sold all his properties at $100. He took $50 and gave his wife $50. This was a result of exasperation as a means of punishing her so that she doesn't benefit from his wealth. So because of anger, because of exasperation, this man decided to sell everything at $100 because the authorities, the court authorities were forcing him to give him half his wealth. So he sold everything at 100, gave her 50, and he remained with 50. He did injustice to himself and injustice to her because he was exasperated, he was angry with her. And this is not the case in Islam, whereby someone is forced by circumstances or by authorities to incur a lot of losses for something that he has been toiling for years to get. So it was a court order forcing the man to give her $50. Some Western countries that used to ban divorce realized their mistake after some time, after which they simplified the procedures of obtaining or giving a divorce. There are many countries where it's not allowed to divorce your wife. There are some states in some countries whereby you cannot divorce your wife. Some countries realized it was not practical. So the last country in Europe, according to research, to legalize divorce was Italy, and that happened in 1971. It's worth mentioning that after sanctioning divorce in Italy, more than 1 million people flocked the courts around the country to seek divorce. So in that year, 1971, when divorce was legalized, according to research, 1 million people flocked the courts to divorce their spouses. So you can see how these people were living in separation when divorce wasn't allowed. So it is something against nature. And as we always say, Islam addresses all aspects of life, and Islam is frank in dealing with problems of human beings, because Allah is our creator. He knows what our needs are. He knows what we can and what we can't do. So if you go against the teachings of Islam, you are lying. You'll go back to square one where you came from. So Al-Usbu' Al-Arabi, this was an Arab Week magazine, issue number 681, page 65, stated that after sanctioning divorce, the card industry in Italy started printing congratulatory cards for the divorced spouses and their well-wishers. So after people were divorced each other, this was an opportunity for the card industry to make money. So they were congratulating those who divorced one another. And they could write on the cards like, "We congratulate you for the divorce and we envy you for your freedom." So in that country, when divorce wasn't allowed, people were denied their rights, stayed in marriage by force. They didn't like it, so they were forced to be there. So when they were given the chance to break away with their partners, so they were being congratulated that, you know, "We congratulate you for the divorce, we envy you." So some other people were envying them for reaching a point of divorce. So something that we already have in Islam more than 1,400 years ago. Only in this country it was legalized in 1971, and we see a result of it. Other cards bore the following phrase like, "What a beautiful decision you've made." So if it was a good decision to ban people from divorcing one another, why were the people congratulating one another? So this means their feelings were suppressed, and when they were allowed to speak their minds, when they were allowed to avail of their rights, they did it, and they were being congratulated by their fellow citizens. So point number 13, the Islamic law gave a woman the right to seek divorce in the following situations. So although we said before that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says any woman who seeks divorce without any right, without any justification, she will not smell the fragrance of paradise. In other words, she won't be among the first people to enter paradise. At the beginning, she will be punished for that, and then eventually she will enter paradise. But there are situations whereby a woman is allowed, and sometimes even it's compulsory for her to seek divorce. So the Islamic law gave a woman the right to seek divorce in the following situations and many more. If her husband stays away from her for a year and she feels she can no longer wait for him, according to some jurists, for 6 months. If he stays away from her 6 months, and she can't stay without him, she has the right to seek divorce. If the husband suffers from chronic diseases, whether infectious or not, such as leprosy, impotence, HIV, among others, so the woman has the right to seek divorce, so that she's not she doesn't get infected by her partner. So in this case, it's even compulsory, because taking precautions, protecting your health gets priority in Islam. If she feels that he can assault her physically, and if he blasphemes her religion, so she is a Muslim, born a Muslim, for example, and a man embraced Islam in order to marry her, but after marrying her, he took her for granted and was abusing her, insulting her religion, blaspheming Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, for example. In such a situation, she has the right to seek divorce from such a marriage, because religion is among the things that Islam came to protect. Is among the 5 things that Islam came to protect. So if anyone insults someone's religion, blasphemes religious figures of a Muslim woman, she has the right to seek divorce. An Islamic scholar and lawyer informed me that he came across a court ruling issued by one of the courts in one of the third world countries, and actually it was a Muslim country, ordering a man to divorce his wife just because she felt threatened by his uninterrupted silence. So this woman, the woman was not talking to her. Every time he was silent, she was threatened by this. She said she didn't know what was going on in his mind. Even when she initiated the talk, the man wouldn't respond. So she was afraid, and she went and complained to the court, and the court ordered this man to divorce her. So in such a situation, she has the right, because maybe he's a criminal, maybe he's thinking something to harm her. And to make matters worse, she said she was making mistakes. He never commented. She was everything she did, whether good or bad, no comments from him. So she was threatened by this, and she had to go to the court in order to get permission, or in order to get help to divorce the man. So it was among the third world countries, majority are Muslims. The court ordered a man to divorce his wife just because she felt threatened by his uninterrupted silence. So the court ruling was supported by the appellate court as well as the Court of Cassation. So to those who are not familiar with legal terms, let me share with you just a layman's definition of these two terms, the appellate court and the Court of Cassation. The appellate court, this is a court that deals with applications for decisions to be reversed. So the court made a decision, for example, a man to be jailed for 6 months. So the appellate court will apply for this decision to be reduced or to be reversed. And the Court of Cassation specializes in judicial decisions on a point of law, and it ensures the good interpretation and proper application of the law. So the Court of Cassation makes sure that the law is well interpreted and well applied. So both the appellate court in that country and the Court of Cassation agreed or forced the man, endorsed the decision that the man should divorce his wife just because he was silent. And this is her right, because Islam again came to protect life. And if anything threatens one's life, he has all the rights. She or he has all the rights to protect themselves. So I will end with this quote, which says, Islam promotes the value of marriage. Islam promotes the value of marriage, which is based on mutual love, sympathy, and respect. So if there is no longer mutual love, there is no longer sympathy, there is no longer respect, then this is divorce is conducive in such a situation. You can't continue in a marriage where there is no love. You can't continue in a marriage where there is no sympathy. You can't continue in a marriage where there is no respect. So especially if a man continuously physically assaults his wife, she has the right to seek divorce. Even in the event of a woman cheating on her husband, a man cannot assault her physically. There is a procedure that he has to follow. So if in this worst case scenario, the man isn't allowed to physically assault his wife, what about in other situations? So if it reaches this point, the woman has all the right to seek divorce. And to prove that divorce is very important in Islam, there's a complete chapter in the Quran named divorce. So it has the rules and regulations of divorce, which means you can't force yourself to stay in a marriage where you are not happy. You know, you have the right to be happy. So why stay with someone whom you're no longer compatible with? No mutual love, no mutual respect, no mutual sympathy. It's meaningless. It's better you break up and then you find someone else. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you are sincere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always bless you with a person who is compatible with you. So with this, I come to the end of tonight's session, and inshallah we will meet some other time when things return to normalcy. And also I am willing, even though we will start giving classes at the Thai Center, we'll make sure that we offer the same classes online so that those who are not in the country can also tune in and benefit from the Islamic knowledge, which is very important. Jazakumullah khairan. If there is any question, you're free to ask, and I will ask Sister Sandy to tell the people how to raise up their hands, how to unmute themselves and ask questions. So Sister Sandy, would you please help explain to them?